Esau the Warrior. This is Yair David speaking to you from Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, speaking to you on behalf of Britam, Hebrew nations, and we are continuing our series concerning Esau, or Esau as the name is pronounced in Hebrew. Esau was the twin brother of Jacob. Jacob is also known as Israel. Esau was the forefather of the 12 tribes. And these 12 tribes became Judah, the Jewish people, and also the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes who got lost, who lost consciousness of their identity, and we know, have proven that they are now to be amongst Western peoples, and that is what our organisation, Britam Hebrew Nations, concentrates upon and dedicates itself to proving and to spreading knowledge of their identity, of their whereabouts amongst Western peoples, and also working towards the reconciliation between the 10 tribes and between the Jewish people who represent Judah. And Judah and the 10 tribes together make 12 tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, descended from Jacob, and he was the twin brother of Esau. And Esau, and what happened to him, and the story in the Bible concerning him is pertinent to our studies, and is of interest to all those who believe in the Bible and study the Bible and wish to know what the Bible is speaking about, what the biblical message is. Now we saw in previous talks how Esau was born, how he came of age, became a hunter, whereas Jacob was a man who dwelt in tents, a simple person, and how one day Jacob was preparing a meal of red lentils, and Esau came in from the field, tired from hunting, and he sold his birthright to Jacob for a pot of red lentils. And the narrative in Genesis continues in Genesis 26:34, tells us that when Esau was 40 years old, he took as wives Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. He married 2 Hittite women. And he did this. And he and his descendants were destined to intermarry with Hittites and also with Ishmaelites and also with others. And these women were not the women whom his parents wanted him to marry, as we shall see. They were not of the stock that was chosen. They were not those who were suited to carry on the promised blessings. And there were grief of mind to Isaac and Rebekah, as it says in Genesis 26:35. He said, taken unsuitable women that were not his own kind, and this caused grief. We're not saying that intermarriage is wrong, is necessarily wrong. We have an article on this on our website. Some cases it is desirable. It does take place in the Bible, but on the whole, the Bible prefers that we stick with our own kind. So this is something in passing. Everyone has to make his own considerations and his own decisions in this matter. And we continue that in Genesis 27 we are told that it came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were so dim that he could not see, that he called it Esau his eldest son and said, "My son," and said, "Here I am." And this apparently took place after Esau had married the Hittite women, and since he was the twin brother of Jacob and Esau, and he was the twin brother of Jacob, therefore Jacob and Esau were both 40 years old at this time, or more than 40 years old. So this is worth taking into consideration when we consider the continuation of the story that is about to unfold. Jacob this time was blind. He was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, as the Bible says. He was blind, he could not see. And he intended to bless Esau. And he called upon him, and Esau came to him. And he said, "Behold, now I am old, I do not know the day of my death." See Genesis 27:2, chapter 27, verse 2. "Now therefore please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and make me savory food, such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." And this is what this is what Isaac told him. He told him to go and hunt for him food, venison, and bring it to him, that he may eat and be satisfied, and that his physical being may be prepared and in such a good mode of thought, of a disposition, so to say, that his spiritual aspects may also combine, and he may be enabled to bless Esau. So we may ask, why did Isaac want to bless Esau? As we shall see, the biblical hero is Jacob. Jacob is a chosen of God, and Isaac is also chosen. Isaac is the son of Abraham, who carries on the promise, the chosen seed, and he passes it on to Jacob. So Isaac too is a person of a high level in biblical standing. But how was it that he chose Esau above Jacob? So there's different explanations, but one explanation is that Jacob was to beget 12 sons. One of these sons was Joseph, and Joseph too has parallels to Esau, and the task of Joseph was that which Isaac had previously thought that Esau would fulfill. In other words, there was a confusion of identities here, and Isaac at that time was not to know that Jacob would give birth to Joseph as well as to other sons, and that the tribes of Esau were split into two different sections, that they would in effect carry out two different tasks. So Isaac was assuming that the task that later fell to Joseph was to fall to Esau, and this is where Isaac made a mistake. And the Bible continues in Genesis 27, verse 5, we hear, now Rebekah was listening when Isaac spoke to Esau his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt game, to bring it. And we should remember that at that time the physical situation of the land of Israel, the land that we know as the land of Israel, was different. As we see in different parts of the Bible, for instance, we learn that there were vast forests throughout all the land before the Arabs and the Turks and the other ones cut it all down and destroyed it. There were vast forests throughout the land, and the land was much wetter. Climate changes have since occurred, and there were fewer people. There was game, abundant game apparently, and it would not have taken too long for someone to go out and just catch himself, hunt himself a few deer and bring them in, prepare them and bring them in to eat. Similar to North America in the early stages of European colonization. So this is so whilst Esau is out there hunting for the food, Rebekah goes and she speaks to Jacob. So Rebekah spoke to Jacob his son, as we hear in Genesis 27 verse 6. So Rebekah spoke to Jacob his son, saying, indeed I heard your father speak to Esau your brother, saying, bring me game and make savory food for me, that I may eat it and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to what I command you. Go now to the flock and bring me there 2 choice kids of the goats, and I will make savory food from them for your father, such as he loves. Then you shall take it to your father, that he may eat it, and he may bless you before his death. And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, look, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth-skinned man. Perhaps my father will feel me, and I shall seem to be a deceiver to him, and I shall bring a curse on myself and not a blessing. But his mother said to him, let your curse be on me, my son, only obey my voice and go get them for me. And he went and he got them, he brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the choice clothes of her elder son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them on Jacob, her younger son. She put the skins of the kids of the goats on the hands and on the smooth part of his neck. Then she gave the savory food and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. So he went to his father and said, my father. And he said, here I am, who are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done just as you told me. Please arise, sit and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. And this is what Jacob presented himself to his father as Esau. And Jacob had not divulged to his father that Esau in effect had sold the birthright to him. Jacob in effect was the possessor of the birthright. Esau had sold the birthright to him. The two of them were twins. They'd been born at one and the same time from the same womb, but Esau had come out first of all, and Jacob had come out a few seconds later, and he had come out clinging onto the heel of Esau. In the Hebrew, the word for heel is Akov, and from that you get the name Yaakov, which we transliterate as Jacob. That's where the name Jacob comes from. And so Jacob had come out a few seconds after Esau. Technically, Esau was there for the firstborn, and he had the right to the first. He had the right to the birthright blessing, and we have to distinguish between the blessings that Isaac was given and the right of the firstborn. There were two separate matters, even though they were interconnected. At all events, the birthright, the right of being the firstborn, was now in the possession of Jacob, and Isaac at this point was not aware of it. And Jacob did not divulge it to him. And Isaac is blind, he cannot see, and he apparently, Jacob and Esau were very similar to each other in many ways, and so now Jacob presented himself to his father as being Esau. Apart from the voice and apart from the hair and so on, he was easily deceived, or there was a sufficient similarity between them for him to know it was either one or the other, but not to be 100% sure which one. And most of us have children, and some of us have more than several children of one of the same sex, and sometimes it happens to all of us that one or other of our children or our grandchildren, when we speak to them over the phone, we know that it is one or other of them, but we are not sure exactly which one, so we can understand the situation. And Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" He knew one of them was my son. And he said, "Because the Lord your God brought it to me." And Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come near that I may feel you, my son, whether you're really my son Esau or not." So Jacob went near to Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, "The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy, like his brother Esau's hands, so he blessed him. The voice was that of Jacob. These matters have been known to say that voice can represent the spiritual content, the inner being of the person. Be that as it may, he recognized that the voice was that of Jacob, was similar to that of Jacob. He wasn't sure, as we know, but the hands were the hands of Esau because he felt them, and he did know that there were those kid skins that had been wrapped upon the hands to make them feel hairy like the hands of Esau. And Jacob in effect was pretending to be Esau. Jacob was taking over the task of Esau. And this brings us to the point that we were talking concerning Joseph, concerning why Isaac in the first place wanted to bless Esau instead of Jacob. Now we see that technically Esau was the firstborn. He had been born a few seconds earlier, so it was his right, or it was not necessarily his right, but he had the prerogative, as if to say. He had the first choice should have gone to him. In addition to that, we've also seen that Isaac loved Esau because Esau was a hunter and he brought food to him. He hunted him for him, and he brought the food, the game that he had trapped or caught. He brought it to his father, and he fed him with it. And because of this, his father loved him, and apparently also because of his macho, masculine characteristics that many males envy or admire in other males, and also women admire them, and that are indeed admirable in the right context. But this is beside the point. There's something beyond that, something deeper. There are recent rabbinical commentators, and they say that Esau was supposed to be the master of the physical world, while Jacob would occupy himself with the Torah. And there are parallels to this in Jewish experience. we have cases where one brother, we have two brothers, one brother will do the work, and the other brother will sit and learn in the synagogue or in the yeshiva, in the rabbinical institution, and both of them will have families, and the one who is working, the one who has the business, supports the one who does not. And even Zebulun and Issachar in rabbinical thought or rabbinical commentary had a similar arrangement amongst the Israelite tribes. And so these recent rabbinical commentators have tended to the idea that originally Esau was supposed to have this world, to be occupied with this world, whereas Jacob would be occupied with spiritual matters, but Esau would support Jacob in his spiritual occupation, so there would be a mutuality between them. There would be a coexistence, a mutual coexistence for them both to fulfill that which had to be done. And the overall task of the chosen people was both to learn the Torah, to keep the Torah, and also to civilize humanity. This was the task of the chosen people. Ultimately it was to devolve on the Israelite nation. And this is the two tasks that nowadays the Israelites have in this world, and this task has been split into two. The Jews, represented by Judah, Jews of Judah, had the task of learning the Torah, keeping the Torah, but they were cut off. They were suspended, as if to say, from physical existence by not having their own country. Whereas the 10 tribes had the task of civilizing humanity, but in order to do this they had to go down, they had to devolve, to degenerate, to go down and to descend to the level of the Gentile nations, and then to evolve and grow upward and bring the rest of the world with them, which is what they have done. And in order to do this they had to forget who they were. And they did, they forgot who they were, and they became like the Gentiles in order to elevate the Gentiles with them. But in the future they will return, they will once again take on the spiritual aspects of their existence, of keeping the law, whereas Judah too will take on the political, geographical aspects of what he needs, of his existence as well. In other words, both sides will go back and adopt those aspects, that part of their being that they had to abandon, and they will readopt them. And the two sides, both Joseph and Judah, will reunite, and they will become one nation, and together they will fulfill the combined tasks that they will have, or that they have had. But until now that they have each one been fulfilling separately. And Isaac, when he wanted to give the blessing to Esau, he thought Esau would fulfill the task that Joseph later fulfilled. And he would also help Jacob. But Rebekah instinctively understood that this was not to be, that this would not work. And that Jacob needed to do both things. The fulfillment of both tasks had to come from Jacob no matter how. It was why she dressed Jacob in the clothes of Esau and put goatskin on his arms to make him seem hairy like Esau was. We shall see that there are parallels between Joseph and Esau. Joseph in effect replaces Esau in this plan. And in reality, Joseph replaces Esau, and Joseph is the adversary of Esau. Esau is the adversary of Joseph, and they shall struggle against each other, and they shall war against each other. In the end times, Joseph will defeat Esau. And this is why, because in effect, the replacement of Esau is not Judah, even though Esau hates Judah and thinks that it is Judah. The replacement, the one who is really replacing Esau in this plan, is Joseph. And this is how God Almighty wanted it to be. This is how God Almighty wants it to be. And this is for the good, the ultimate good of Esau himself, as we shall show. And Genesis 27:24 continues. And this is Isaac speaking, and Isaac says, and he says, "Are you really my son Esau?" He said, "I am." He said, "Bring it near to me that I will meet on my son's game, so that my soul may bless you." So he brought it near to him, and he ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said to him, "Come near now and kiss me, my son." And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing, and he blessed him and said, "Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed." And here we have the field associated with the blessing of God Almighty. Esau was called a man of the field. Jacob had the smell of Esau on him from the clothes of Esau that he was wearing. Now Jacob was to receive the blessing through disguising himself as Esau, through dressing himself as up to be as someone whom he was not. And so too, the 12 sons of Jacob included Joseph. Joseph was to fulfill the material, physical aspects of the blessings that Jacob was to receive. And Joseph too had to dress himself up as if to be disguised as something similar to Esau. Joseph had to lose his identity, lose consciousness of his ancestry, and he had to become like the Gentiles, in other words, like Esau, and he had from that point, from that position, he had to evolve upwards to bring the rest of the world with him, which is what Joseph had done, and this is the task of Joseph. And Joseph, in doing this, enjoyed the blessing that Jacob had given to him, and this blessing was the same blessing that Jacob had taken from his father Isaac, and which Isaac had given unto him, or blessed him on the understanding that he was really Esau, whereas he was not. But as we shall see, this blessing was actually God-given, as Isaac recognized, and God was the one blessing, and God wanted that this blessing should go to Jacob and not go to Esau, as Isaac himself admitted, as we shall see further on. Verse 27-28 tells us, continuing the blessing of Isaac to Jacob. Therefore may God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine, that is agricultural plenty and great blessings. Genesis 27 verse 29, that people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, that your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone that curses you, and blessed be those who bless you. And in here he gives him control, rulership over his brethren, over his brothers. By this he means Ishmael, who is actually his uncle, the brother of his father. Ishmael meaning the Arabs, and also Esau. Esau, in effect, represents most of the more developed countries of the earth, both in Asia and in Europe. And Jacob was given dominion over them. And this is the blessing that Jacob received. And in Genesis 27:30 we are told that after Jacob received the blessing, he went out. Now it happened as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, but Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father. Esau his brother came in from his hunting. Esau apparently caught his game, came in, prepared it, and he came in to receive the blessing. And he came in just after Jacob had gone out, had left. And Jacob had just managed. This was divine providence. And Genesis 27 verse 31 continues and tells us that he, that is Esau, also had made savory food and brought it to his father, and said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me. And his father Isaac said to him, who are you? So he said, I'm your son, your firstborn Esau. And Isaac trembled exceedingly and said, who? Where's the one that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it before you came, and I have blessed him, and indeed he shall be blessed. In other words, he knew that the blessing that he had given, he knew that from inside him it was a genuine blessing. The blessing was blessed, was irrevocable, it had been given, and had been given through God Almighty, and that he was the agency, the conduit for this blessing. And sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I give talks, explanations, lectures, and meet with other people, and usually I prepare them, or I write things down, or print things out. I read it through. I already know the material, but I read it through, prepare it in my mind, and I get up there to give the talk, or to give a lecture, and I look around and start talking, and it often comes out that what I intended to say is not exactly doesn't exactly go according to plan. Sometimes it comes out better, sometimes a little bit worse. It sticks more or less to the agenda, but there's always certain deviations, and sometimes the deviations are quite significant, and these emanate more from the people I'm talking to than from myself. That psychologically, a person who gives a talk or says something, he interacts with the recipient. So too, when you teach someone, or someone teaches us, if we don't pay attention, if we're half asleep, then we find that the teacher himself, he loses heart. He knows that these words are not going in, are not being absorbed as they should be. Even if we try and bluff him and tell him to keep going, he feels it. People feel it. People feel each other, and they interact accordingly. And so too, when Isaac gave the blessing, he was giving the blessing to Jacob, even though he thought that the person being blessed was Esau. Jacob was the one receiving it, and he felt the dynamism. There was a dynamism between them. He felt that Jacob was the recipient, that Jacob was receiving it, and the blessing, the formulation of the words that he was saying, the words that were coming out of his mouth, were according to what Jacob had to receive. And he knew this. And therefore it was a blessing. It didn't really matter. It was not important anymore who the person was receiving the blessing. The point was the blessing was being given, the blessing was genuine, and that it was coming from a power beyond him, and being transmitted to the person receiving it. And so he said that he blessed him, and indeed he is blessed. And when we are told in Genesis 27 verse 34, when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, "Bless me also, O my father." And he said, "Your brother came with his seed and has taken away your blessing." And Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took my birthright, and now look, he has taken away my blessing." And he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Now Esau said, "Is he not rightly called named Jacob? He has supplanted me these 2 times. So Jacob was born at the same time as Esau. Esau came out first, Jacob came out after him. And when Jacob came out, he was hanging on, he was grabbing hold of the heel in the Hebrew Akev, and that was why he is called Jacob, or Yaakov in Hebrew, Yaakov. Also sometimes pronounced as Yankov. At all events, he was clutching on the heel, and that's why he received this name. But also this name has other connotations. And the biblical stories and the biblical narratives and the biblical exegesis and commentaries and understanding of the Bible, the significance of names is very important. And there's very often that names have more than one signification, have several meanings, and these different meanings all have different applicabilities according to the situation. So Jacob, in addition to meaning someone who grabs hold of the heel as if to say, Jacob can also mean, is related to a word akaba, meaning to come with trickery. Or it can also mean the Yaakov, to overtake, to overcome. When one car passes another on the road, it goes around, it overtakes the other car. Also when someone takes something with trickery, with dubious means, he comes with akaba, as if to say. So this too can be related to the name Yaakov, from the same root. And so he is saying he's rightly called Yaakov because he's overtaken me, and not only has he overtaken me, he's also used trickery against me to take that which in my opinion should have been mine. And this is what he said to Isaac. In a sense, Esau was right. He had a point. Jacob had indeed come, and he had taken by trickery, by supplanting, by posing as himself, by posing himself as Esau. He had taken the blessing, he received the blessing through deviousness. But as we shall see later, Esau struggles with an angel. He meets an angel, or actually an angel whom at first he considers a man, and he struggles with him, he wrestles with him all night long. And in the morning, he will not release him until he receives the blessing. And the angel blesses him, and he gives him the blessing. He confirms the blessing. This angel, according to the sages, was the guardian angel, the spiritual representative of Esau in the heavenly court. And he confirms, in the name of Esau, as if to say, in the name of the spiritual aspects of Esau, he confirms the blessing to Jacob. And he says, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but your name shall be called Israel, for you have wrestled with man and with gods, and have overcome. And also this name, Israel, is connected to a similar name, Yeshurun, in Hebrew. Then in Hebrew the two names are similar, they look similar, they use similar letters. Yeshurun as seen in Deuteronomy 32:15 and Deuteronomy 33:15, and Yeshurun is derived from the root yasha, meaning upright, meaning honest. In other words, Jacob will change, or will not change. Jacob will confirm his right to the blessing in a straightforward manner, through fighting for it, through demanding it, and through taking it as something that belonged rightfully to himself. And Esau himself will acknowledge this, and this will be for the greater good of Esau, as will become clear in the end times. And this wrestling all night long, the wrestling represents the period of exile, when Jacob will have to prove himself. And indeed he will do so. Ultimately, before the coming of the dawn, as the coming of the dawn arrives, he will have proven himself. He will justify his taking of the blessing. Jacob was to be master of all the peoples of the earth, as Isaac said, and he replied to Esau. He said in Genesis 27:37, Isaac answered and said to Esau, indeed, I have made him your master, and all his brethren I have given to him as servants. With grain and wine I have sustained him. What shall I do now for you, my son? They have given him great material prosperity, and made him master over everyone. And Genesis 27:38 says that Esau said to his father, have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me also, my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and he wept. Isaac his father answered, said to him, behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. And he says here promised a fertile, rich place to dwell in, the fatness of the earth. That is what the Bible says. That is the same simple proof, the same simple meaning, literal meaning of the Hebrew verses. There are some commentators who for some reason twist this verse. Maybe they have a source. I have not found it. I do not believe it is a Jewish, but it could be. I doubt it very much, but it could be. There are some who interpret this verse, however, as saying that your dwelling shall be far from the fatness of the earth, as if they changed it, making it sound the opposite of what it actually says. And it could be that this is some type of rationalization. Later on, Esau was to receive a land of his own to the southeast of Judah, to the southeast of Israel, and this area is relatively barren, at least to our modern eye, at least in its modern present-day state. In a previous era, in previous times, it might have been much better. And so they were saying, since it's not rich, and therefore maybe they're just rationalizing to say that this is what Edom received. Therefore, the blessing must have meant that not that you will receive the fatness of the earth, but it will be far away from the fatness of the earth. So this is stretching it, but for some reason or other it's been accepted by a lot of Christian exegetes, commentators. I just wanted to say that it's not incorrect. Esau was promised a rich, fat, verdant area to dwell in. And apart from this area of Edom that we mentioned, that Esau was later known as Edom, there were also communities of descendants of Esau throughout the Middle East and also elsewhere, and they were quite powerful. They settled in regions belonging to Tyre, the Phoenician Tyre, and to Babylon, and to Mesopotamia in general, and North Syria and Ugarit. And also we have inscriptions in Ugarit mentioning a community or a country belonging to Edom. It's known as Edom Eretz in the northern Syria, land of Edom, another land of Edom in addition to that which was the southeast of Judah. And there it is expressly said, as if to confirm what we are saying, it is expressly described as being well watered. So this is a point worth noting. And later on, we find Edomites ruling over Rome, the Roman Empire, which was the most powerful and the most wealthy empire in its period, in its time. And also in Germany, and Germans are quite well off. And also we find Edomites amongst the ruling classes of Russia and of Europe in general. and they're usually up there with the elites. They are well off, they are prosperous. And this is the blessing, according to the simple literal meaning, that Isaac gave to Esau. He also continues blessing Isaac continues blessing to Esau. Genesis 27:40, he says, by your sword you shall live, you shall serve your brother. It shall come to pass when you become restless that you shall break his yoke from your neck. The descendants of Esau, Esau was also known as Edom. They were warriors. Esau was a military man, he himself was a hunter, a man of the field, and his descendants were also destined to be similar to him, to be warriors, fighters, military types. And even the Talmud says that every war requires the presence of Esau in order to achieve victory. In other words, we need people from Esau in our forces. We need them around us when we have to fight wars against their enemies. So it's good to have someone like Esau, descendants of Esau, with us, because they have a talent, a proclivity for this type of action, of this type of calling. They have a calling for it, and they're good at it, and therefore we should use them. And this is what the Bible is telling us. And also we find quite a few descendants of Esau amongst the Germans. The Germans were very famous amongst the barbarians, amongst the ruling classes of Europe, and amongst the warrior classes. They are known as to being formidable fighters, and apparently this is hereditary with the descendants of Esau. Also, we think we have evidence indicates that the part of the ruling class of Japan were also from Edom, and they too have this military aptitude. We continue. The Bible continues its narrative and tells us in Genesis 27:41. So Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father blessed him, and Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I kill my brother Jacob. So Esau was the first anti-Semite, the first hater of the Jewish people. He wanted to kill him. He wanted to kill Jacob because he thought that Jacob had taken away from him that which belongs to him. And so nowadays we also have a replacement theology where Christians claim that they are the true Israelites and they have replaced the Jews, and they hate the Jews for still believing in Judaism, for still believing in the Bible, and they occasionally try and kill them or try and do harm to them. So this is a continuation of the inheritance of Esau, which we should be aware of. Genesis 27:42 continues and says, the words of Esau, his older son, were told to Rebekah. So she sent and called Jacob, her younger son, and said to him, surely your brother Esau comforts himself concerning you by intending to kill you. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, arise, flee to my brother Laban in Haran, and stay with him a few days until your brother's fury turns away, until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereaved also of you both in one day? She says, Rebekah says, why should I be bereaved? Why should I have to mourn over both of you in one day? And from this, she is hinting that Esau also needs the existence of Jacob. The blessing that was given to Jacob was also for the ultimate good of Esau himself. Esau, in effect, should realize that the blessing to Jacob, the blessing to Esau, is also for the good of him. But Esau himself would be blessed by this. And if anything happens to Jacob, God forbid, Esau himself would suffer. And Rebekah had known. Rebekah had dressed Jacob up in the clothes and of Esau, and made him to appear comme Esau in order to receive the blessing, because she had been told before they were born that when the two children were in her womb, were inside of her and struggling, and she went to ask God what was the meaning of it, and the Lord said to her, you see in Genesis 25:23, and the Lord said to her, two nations are in your womb, two people shall be separated from your body, one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Now this expression, the older shall serve the younger, we saw that it's not exactly that way. It can be understood, one shall serve the other, the younger shall serve the older under certain conditions, but the primary meaning is this, that the older shall serve the younger. And this was a prophecy, this was the word of God, and therefore Rebekah knew that according to the will of God, Jacob should have the predominance. Jacob should receive the blessings, and therefore what she did according to the will of the God Almighty. And we tend to, because Rebecca is a woman, because she is self-effacing to some degree, we tend to disregard her or not take into account her own intrinsic importance. She herself was had a high level of spiritual being. She was close to God Almighty. She spoke with God, and in a sense she herself was a prophetess, or on a similar level to that of a prophetess. And she was able to communicate with God. What she did by divine guidance. And these two should be realized. And so Rebecca said to Isaac, her husband, in Genesis 27:46, she said, I'm weary of my lot because of the daughters of Het, the women whom Esau had married. If Jacob takes a wife of the daughters of Het, those are the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me? So he said, because of the women that Esau had taken, she doesn't want to live anymore. And if Jacob also goes in the same way, she won't want any sense left in staying alive. Therefore she prevailed upon Isaac to send Jacob away to take a woman from their own kin in order to continue the promised line and the blessings. And so we are told in Genesis 28 verse 1, then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Paddan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father. Take yourself a wife from there, the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you, and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may be an assembly of peoples. Give you the blessing of Abraham to you and your descendants with you, that you may inherit the land in which you are a stranger, which God gave to Abraham. Isaac confirmed the blessing to Jacob. Jacob was here consciously announcing that the blessing to Abraham that he had received from Abraham was to pass on to Jacob. Jacob was to receive the blessing. Jacob was to inherit the blessings. It's no longer dependent on the subterfuge, on the trickery of Jacob. It was straight out and forward and acknowledgedly and in full consciousness given over to Jacob. Isaac had been tricked at the conscious level, but he realized that such was the will of God, and he accepted it. And he also says that you inherit the land wherein you are a stranger, and this has been understood to mean the land of Israel, but it could also mean those lands in which he would be in the time of exile, when he will be exiled from the Holy Land, but he will wander in Europe and possess other countries, and those lands should be hid. And Genesis 28:5 says that Isaac sent Jacob away. He went to Paddan Aram to Laban the son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. So here we have Rebekah expressly mentioned as the mother of Jacob and Esau. She was the mother to both of them. What she had done out of love and of both of his children. In Paddan Aram, Jacob met Laban, the brother of Rebekah. He married the daughters of Laban, and he begat from them and from their maidservants 12 sons, and these 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel. And we are told further on in this chapter, Genesis 28 verse 6, Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Paddan Aram to take himself a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he gave him a charge, saying, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. But Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and had gone to Paddan Aram. Also Esau saw the daughters of Canaan, did not please his father Isaac. So Esau went to Ishmael, took Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nabaioth, to be his wife, in addition to the wives he had. So he saw that the wives he had were not pleasing and not good in the eyes of his parents, but he didn't put them away. He just took another wife, who he thought would be more favourable, would be more pleasing to his parents, especially to his father Isaac, and took a woman, a daughter of Ishmael. Ishmael was the forefather of the Arabs, and this indicates to us, or the commentators and the sages took this as an indication that in the future Esau, Edom, that is Europe, the powers of Europe, the non-Israelite powers of Europe, will attempt to unite with Ishmael, with the Arabs, and this will happen in the end times, and we see this in process, or possibly in process before our eyes. In the EU, and amongst the technocrats who rule Europe, who control Europe, now for generations upon generations, they are preparing the way. They are working towards what they hope will be an ultimate unification of North Africa and of the Muslim world with Europe, that they shall be one entity. And they are in the process of setting this policy, this political, cultural movement into practice, and that is what they're working at, and they've been doing it for several generations. There have been books written upon it, especially Eurabia, Or, Yara, and other works, and this is a known phenomenon. Whether or not it will bear fruition, time will tell, but it is a fact that in our generation that is what is being worked at, that is what is being put into practice. There's a process on hand, a conscious political policy to attempt to unify the Islamic and the Christian or post-Christian cultural continuums of European civilization with that of the Arab world. And we shall see how things go, and they are liable to team up together and to work against the Israelite peoples. The Israelite peoples are now amongst Western nations, those Western nations on the periphery of the Western world, as if to say, in North America, Canada, Australia, the USA, New Zealand, South Africa, Britain, Ireland, the Scandinavian countries, Holland, Belgium and France, Switzerland, all contain significant proportions of those 10 tribes amongst them. Not all the people in those countries belong to those 10 tribes, are descended from Israel, but a significant proportion of them are, as we have proven. And we shall see how, and these peoples are the descendants of Jacob. Joseph is to be found amongst the English-speaking peoples primarily. The peoples of North America, the USA and Canada, and also of those of the British Isles and offshoots of the British Isles. And whereas Judah is represented by the Jews, the Jewish people in the land of Israel, and in the diaspora. And we shall see how things play themselves out. But it is interesting to note that the modern politics, present-day current events, are fitting into the patterns that the Bible spoke of. Thank you. May God bless.